so K is silent, Kseniya Stupak.
Kseniya Stupak. Okay.
Perfect.
Well,
Perfect.
thank you for allowing me to interview you. This is very casual. I'm doing it from my home, so you may hear grandkids and different people in the background sometimes, which
That's
is
perfectly fine.
typical. Um, tell me the story of Sarah and her family. Do you want to outline that story?
Sure. First of all, I just received the message from Sarah that she doesn't want us to use her last name.
Which we
So,
haven't yet.
okay. So she doesn't want to use her last name and any of her children's name.
Okay.
So, um,
I
you haven't,
suspected that.
you have not published it, right?
It did go to print this morning, but there were no last names and no children's names or ages.
Oh, perfect.
The only thing we do have is her picture, but I think that'll
Okay.
be think that'll be okay because since I didn't talk to the apartment complex, I didn't want to have any names or things because I we probably will need to talk to them maybe as a follow-up, but I didn't
Hmm.
really want there to be identifiable names because I haven't talked to them yet.
Okay.
So,
Okay. So, um, let me see. Um,
I think it started last year with her, maybe in February of
she,
2023
mhm.
or
She moved in.
2024.
Yes, she moved in with her children in February 2024. 5 days after she moved in into the apartment, all the flooding started. And the flooding were continuous for 2 weeks. So the whole room was completely flooded. All the water intrusion was coming from the window. And
Oh,
I believe it was window. It saturated the wall where the window located, and it went down the floor.
okay.
So the baseboard were saturated with water, and obviously, once there is water, and it stays for some time, the mold starts to grow. And it's interesting because the mold starts growing between 24 and 48 hours if nothing gets done.
Okay.
So there were actually, once she moved in, she already noticed there were mildew or mold around the windows.
Hmm.
She noticed that her kids' health started to digress. Right
Hmm.
away, went to see the doctors, and doctors, as usual with mold, they could not identify a problem. They could not link it to anything. Now, she immediately contacted the landlords and management company, but landlords did absolutely nothing.
Hmm.
Um, she called health department. They came in. She called them and complaining about the mold because she felt that the smell, this musty smell that became worse and worse and worse. So she said there's got to be some water damage and mold associated with
And
it.
I
So
need to ask an obvious question. The water that came in from the window, her window was closed.
her windows were closed.
Okay.
Now, the department, the health department, did a visual inspection.
Hmm.
They saw that there was some mildew here and there, but they concluded, since at that point when they inspected the property, there was no visual
Hmm.
water anywhere, they said, well, we don't have enough information to conclude that there is mold. They did no testing, no air test to determine if there is any mold. They didn't bring any moisture meter to test the walls and see what's the percentage of moisture that existed in the walls. They did absolutely nothing. It was complete visual inspection.
And
They
they
said,
said
we don't.
they
Mhm,
couldn't do more because it was dry. And because
exactly.
the floor was dry, there was no visible water. So
Exactly.
if you call the county, you have to call them in the middle of the flood. I mean, by then the mold may not be growing yet. So
Exactly.
that's interesting.
So, but it's not every county is like this. I've had cases in Los Angeles County, Orange County. Some inspectors actually do a better job to, take photos to document everything. I guess this was not done in this particular case, unfortunately. So, now, after that, city inspection, the health inspection. Um, oh, I believe the department, the health department, when they came to do the visual inspection, they did see that there was a discoloration on the wood, which will absolutely dictate that there is a moisture, right?
Right.
They saw the discoloration, but they saw a lot of bugs. She had a lot of bugs at that point, and they saw that the windows were cracked. So,
Oh,
and I think they have this in their report as well. Now they didn't cite anything. They created the report and fixed. They said something to the landlord, the management company is required to fix the window
hmm.
and get rid of the bugs in the property. Now we are in June 2024, right? Several months later, they go to the management and they say, we're gonna take this to the news. We can't live in this property. We don't feel safe. It's uninhabitable property. If you don't fix or don't do anything, we are left with no option but speak to the world, speak to the press about it. And landlord management company came after that, after being threatened, I guess.
Right.
And what they did, they just painted over mold in June
Hmm.
2024.
Just
That's all they
typical,
did.
right?
Completely typical.
Yeah.
And you know what also is typical is that a lot of the management company do, they take the bleach and
Hmm.
they just bleach the walls or whatever, whenever they see mold, they just, apply the bleach. And then what happens with the bleach, it's the worst thing that can be done, actually.
Really?
So check this out. If you apply bleach, mold, this organism, it has this protective mechanism.
Oh,
Like skunks, when
hmm.
they're terrified,
Right.
they get this, smelly thing out of them, right? Same thing with mold. Once it gets terrified, it releases the mycotoxin. So
Really? Okay.
mycotoxin is this, toxins that
Sure.
stays in your body. So that's a big problem with all this management company when they just spray it with bleach and it releases all this mycotoxin in the air that people breathe in and it spreads all over the property. So it's a very dangerous thing to do.
Let me
But we
stop you
see.
again.
Mhm.
Though her kids had started getting sick after she moved into the property, and she didn't think of it being mold until much later. But um, can we talk about some of the symptoms? The newborn baby started having eczema right away, which was very uncomfortable and is still, I guess, suffering from that. And the daughter, um, from what I remember, she was having some respiratory issues and other things. I don't remember. But anyway, she had been to several specialists and they couldn't identify why she was having issues. Is that right?
Correct. So uh daughter had sleep apnea. She's been seen by ENT doctors. She went to see allergist because she couldn't understand why she's covered in rash all over the body
Oh,
and
she had a
eczema.
rash too.
She had her, yes.
Okay.
So allergist actually, doctors usually cannot, they do allergy tests. But the thing
Mhm.
is, the science show that just because you're not allergic to mold doesn't mean that you can be exposed and develop symptoms.
Right.
So a lot of doctors, they just test for mold and there's like, oh, this child or this person is not allergic to mold. But okay, that's fine. It doesn't mean that this person cannot be exposed to mold and suffer injuries from it, right?
Sure.
So
Sure.
um, there was a lot of, so I know that the daughter and Sarah, she had headaches, constant headaches, cramping to, those cramps in legs, and the stomach would be hurting as well.
Okay.
Now, the Dr. Maria Sebane, I think, Sebiane.
You mean
So
from
she,
LA? Dr.
it's a
Sabine?
Sabine, yes, it's a children's hospital. No, San Diego.
Oh, San Diego. I wonder
San
if that,
Diego.
okay.
So that's the first doctor who said it might be a toxic mold.
Mhm.
So now ENT wanted to do the surgery. They had to remove adenoids. And then the daughters always had the black circles under her eyes. Constant throat cleaning. So she would have to
Sure.
do this, because it felt like something was in there. Um, Now, son was perfectly healthy, 11-pound baby when he was born.
Hmm.
Absolutely healthy baby. And he right away, when he was born, he started to use his mouth to breathe because he couldn't get enough oxygen through his nose.
Okay.
He was constantly sick. He had constant ear infections and abscess. So he went under anesthesia when he was 4 months old for the surgery.
Wow.
Both kids developed significant cough. They were on constant antibiotics and they just couldn't understand what's going on. So they were trying to treat the bacterial infections,
Right.
right? Not knowing that it can be more than that.
Right.
Um, so Now, that's as far as the medical conditions. I know that Sarah also was extremely exhausted, and that's typical of the mold exposure. It's dizziness, it's brain fog, it's depression, exhaustion. So I know
And
that she just,
forgetfulness.
forgetfulness,
I think I
yes.
read that
So
too.
yeah, forgetfulness is a big one. And what's interesting? It depends, mold affects each individual differently. Some people develop the long-term memory issues. Some people develop short-term memory issues. It's just it's interesting how it affects everybody differently. Um, so that's as far as the health condition, that's what's known right now. We will be finding the doctors who have expertise in mold. So we will send everybody to see those doctors to go through many testing. They'll do probably the brain MRI, neuroquant, to determine how it affected their frontal lobe and other parts of the brain. So they do that now. The doctors highly recommend to see what supplements they needed or what future treatment they needed to get this old toxicity out of the body.
Okay, so we're up to June and she's talked to management and she's called in the county. And then she said that she was at church and one of the ladies that she was talking to suggested that maybe those symptoms could be mold related.
Right. So that's our current time, right?
Um,
February 2025. So, she did not know better.
Right.
they came in, they painted everything, and
Yeah.
she thought maybe, oh, it's all done, it's all clean and clear, but the kids are still sick.
Yeah.
She's still sick and she can't understand what's happening. So at the church, one of her friends suggested that have you checked your place for mold? Maybe you have some mold at your apartment. And that's what she did. She bought some home self-tests and
Mm-hmm.
she collected the swabs from different places in her home and she sent it to the laboratory and laboratory confirmed that there was aspergillus, there was penicillium, and other types of mold present in her apartment. So she hired the professional company to do the inspection. They came in, they did an inspection in her home, and there was so much aspergillus and penicillium that they found. So one thing she did
Wow.
the home test, and another thing there was a professional company.
Mm-hmm.
That's their job. That's what they do every day. And they
Mm-hmm.
took all the swabs and air sample, and they confirmed a huge presence of aspergillus and penicillium, and also there was cladosporium, which is also a mold that can be potentially toxic and can release mycotoxins in the air as well.
Okay.
So that's their story.
That was okay.
She contacted the landlords and management company. She sent them all the reports and she said, I don't feel safe to be in this place. You need to come in remediate this place immediately. And they said they needed time. And so, but at this point, and I don't blame her, I would take my kids and I would run away. So, and she was advised by the professionals to get rid of
Trader.
all of her
Oh,
property.
oh
So
yeah.
all the clothes,
Mm-hmm.
everything, every spurious material
Mm-hmm.
can collect those mycotoxin because they're so teeny tiny, they're flying everywhere in the air. So, if it's the metal frame, that's going to be fine. But all clothes, baby toys, the photos, the most
Mattresses.
important things for you,
Right.
it's your
Right.
memory. You
Yeah.
know, she would have to get rid of everything. And she actually started already. She's just been dumping everything,
Yeah.
um, all the toys, everything. So
All
she
her
has to
furniture.
start everything. Yes, furniture, cribs, blankets,
Yeah.
mattresses. Yeah, so tables, chairs, everything has to go. And that's the
So,
decision she made.
um, mold as I understand it, just from the what I've read doing the story, is it's especially tough in like drywall and wood and all that because you may not see it on the front. It could be in the back and it's growing inside. And then it releases spores in the air or whatever, and that's what those mycotoxins you're talking about.
Mycotoxins, yes. So
Okay.
let's say we have a water leak between the walls.
Mm-hmm.
It's not visible. Maybe it's a
Right.
teeny tiny streaking. It's
Yeah.
just teeny tiny leak. Well, nobody noticed that, right? But as
Yeah.
I mentioned, between 24 and 48 hours, that's the mold
Right.
start to grow, right? And in order to grow, they need moisture source. So
Yeah.
this leak is just, continuous. It starts growing and growing and growing, and nobody can see it. But
Yeah.
the water damaged molds such as Aspergillus, Penicillium, Stachybotrys, Chatomium, those types of mold, they produce mycotoxins. So it just sits there, and we have an outlet, for example, right? Usually, what some of the experts say, if you don't touch it, it just stays there. Well, no, you have cracks, you have outlets, right? And all these mycotoxins travel. They don't need much room, opening to travel. And that's what happens. So, yes, just because it's between the walls, it's still dangerous.
Okay. I had a family member who their family was in another Fallbrook apartment complex and they were laying in bed at night reading books to the kids, and all of a sudden they started to see the ceiling crack. And so they got up and they moved the bed, and the ceiling, part of the ceiling fell in, and it was just covered with black and green and orange and white. I took pictures of it at the time. I couldn't believe it. All these different colors of mold. And when they contacted the management, they just said, "We'll close the door and sleep in another room tonight,"
Oh my
which of course they
God.
didn't do. And then I was telling them, "You've got to get out of there. Got to get the family out of there." So they left, but then the management wouldn't help them. They said they had no other rooms or no other apartments available, and they wouldn't put them up in a hotel. So they ended up coming here. But when they finally did patch it, they just had their maintenance guy just cut a square and patch it and paint it, and that's all. That's all that happened. And who knows? They said that came from a leak that had must have been a very long time, but from upstairs in the bathroom. But I
Oh my
just
God.
thought, how could they be so negligent? Because there's just so much potential liability there. It's just
Oh my
crazy.
God.
So that's what I wanted to ask you is how prevalent is this in rental units, apartment complexes and all that? Do you know?
So, yes, mold problems are very common in Southern California apartments. And, our warm climate, when coupled with poor maintenance or water intrusions,
Hmm.
creates perfect condition for mold growth. And we actually seen hundreds of cases annually. And I suspect that many more
Really?
go completely unreported.
Oh,
Yes.
for sure.
So, but California's specific laws on mold in rental underscores how widespread the issue is. So, landlords by law must disclose known mold problems and they must address the mold issues promptly. But sadly, not everybody complies with that. So, that's just the reality.
Okay.
There's the landlord's management company, they constantly trying to save money, so they trying to close their eyes, they trying to paint things over to save money. And releasing this information to a new tenant that, hey, we had mold in this apartment and it's been remediated, but we had mold, there is a high risk that this person is not going to move in. So
Sure.
a lot of times they do not disclose this information. And we have many cases where, we do the discovery and we find out that actually prior tenants complained about exact same issue
Oh
and
my
nothing
gosh.
was done.
Yeah.
So that's a fraud. That's already a fraud.
Okay. And I'm wondering if it's more prevalent in lower income units or apartments, although nothing is lower income in California, I feel like right now. But, in wealthy areas, I wonder if it's as prevalent there as it is in lower income areas.
It's interesting that mall does not discriminate based on zip code or rent prices. We've seen, the major problems with mold in apartments, regardless of their location,
Mm,
regardless of the
okay.
rental price. It's the most important thing is the failure to timely address water damage and the moisture intrusion problems. So whether the landlord is a high end or a budget complex, if they fail to quickly respond to water intrusion problems,
Mm,
that's where the mold starts growing, right? So, but another problem with mold, because landlords and management companies often, as I mentioned earlier, try to save money, and instead of hiring professional water remediation companies, they just use the unskilled handyman labor for water damage repair. And
yeah.
this individual quite often lack the expertise or any
Hmm.
equipment, appropriate equipment that's necessary to remove this moisture and mold prevention. So it's,
Which makes
I
it
think
dangerous for them too, right?
absolutely.
Yeah.
They come in using no mask. They are not fully equipped. They're not putting on the right gear, and they cut in the walls. And
Right.
that spreads all those mycotoxins.
Wow.
They have to have HEPA vacuums. They have to have dehumidifier. They have to build the containment before they start cutting the walls. They have to remove all the furniture, but that's just simply not done. So it puts, in danger not only the tenants, but also the workers.
Sure. Yeah.
It's landlords quite often decide to save money. So even luxury apartments can harbor dangerous mold if water issues are not properly addressed.
So so a lot of people, like I would imagine Sarah, because she's a single parent, I mean, it seemed like her options were either to live with it or to move out before she hired your firm. And that probably wasn't possible for her because if she goes somewhere else, she has to come up with, the more money to move anyway. And now she has to replace all of her furniture and clothes and items and all that. So I would imagine that's usually an issue too.
It is an issue. Um, you know, Tenants like Sarah, they are put in this position where, first of all, if you start living a couple years ago, then, they have a fixed rent increase, right? So
Mhm.
they cannot increase by so many percent a year. Now, if this person has to move out of property, now they have to pay another deposit. They're gonna likely lose that previous deposit because landlord will try to find ways to keep
Something.
that deposit to fix
Yeah.
everything possible, right? So yes, she's facing with coming up with a deposit.
Mm-hmm.
She's facing with much higher rent because several years later, now she's moving in, they can put any price to that rent, right? It's not controlled the first year. So there's a lot of problems, and a lot of people have no option but to keep living at the same apartment, just begging for help, just begging
Right.
the landlord to fix the problem,
Yeah.
relying on their expertise, especially large complexes, just small tenant who that is
Mm-hmm.
not business savvy, absolutely going to rely on the expertise of the landlord and the people who come in and trying to fix or remediate the
Right.
property,
Right.
the tenant doesn't know better.
So from your experience, what are the steps that somebody should do? What are the things that they can do if they suspect there may be a mold issue?
If you suspect you have a mold issue, you need to first contact the landlord. Put everything in writing, document it. Put the reasoning why you think that you have mold in your apartment. The landlord or management company will typically send somebody to investigate, but they just do a visual inspection and unlikely do anything. Nobody just starts doing the mold testing unless they see, yes, there is a running water, the wall is completely wet, right? They
Yeah,
might
right,
bring somebody. But if they don't do that, I recommend to hire your own mold inspector. Have this person to test your walls with moisture meter, identify where this um, water source is coming from,
mm-hmm.
right? Because it's coming from somewhere. Mold just not gonna grow on its own. It needs moisture. So identify the source of moisture, take all the testing, samples, swap samples, determine what kind of molds are there in the property, and immediately send it to the landlord. Have them to do the right thing, you
Right,
know, have them to deal with it and, give them certain time. This is the water intrusion problem is, and it requires an immediate response from the landlord, meaning 24 hours. So if the tenant sent this report and let's say that the leak was found, right? The leak must be addressed within 24 hours. So ask your landlord to relocate you to the hotel, to the available apartment. Have the landlord clean whatever can be cleaned in within your personal property with the HEPA vacuums. A lot of the clothes or furniture cannot be cleaned and just have to be thrown away. So if the landlord is not doing this minimum things, then I highly recommend to contact the attorney who has been working in the cases like this, with the cases like this, because, you know, you are putting yourself at so much risk by continuing living in this apartment. And, you know, it's not just your risk, it's the risk of your family. If you know that you have mold, you're constantly exposed with the mycotoxins. So it can be extremely dangerous. So I recommend to relocate if that's possible. And contacting an attorney, of course, because, you know, once you have a lawyer, you have representation. Sometimes lawyer can quickly resolve it by just sending a letter and ask the landlord to do what's right, you
Yeah.
know, and if that's not happening, then there can be a potential lawsuit.
Okay. And if somebody hires your firm, do you bring in the experts and all that to fight the lawsuit?
Absolutely, absolutely. We'll have the standard of care experts, we'll have doctors, depending on what kind of issues our client has suffered. We will find the doctors who will try to help them. We'll, you know, come up with a future medical plan. So we'll have the mold inspectors who will evaluate the apartment, evaluate the reports, lab results, and make their conclusion of, you know, landlords or management companies' negligence. So we absolutely have to hire experts in cases like that.
Okay. Well, is there anything else that you would like to add? How long do these cases usually take to litigate?
Sure. Well, in a perfect world, it could take 2 to 3 years, but since COVID happened,
Mm.
the courts have so many cases. Their
Oh my
dockets are
gosh.
just, it's thousands and thousands and thousands of cases. So we
Wow.
have sometimes cases that last for 5 years, you
Oh my
know.
gosh.
So, but we're really trying to do the right thing. We've built strong reputation. Strongin LLP, our
Yeah.
firm built very strong reputation. So a lot of defense firms know us and they are you know, they know that we're a reasonable firm and we're trying to resolve the case before going to trial. So we're really trying to expedite and to maximize the recovery for our clients so they can use this money to treat themselves and their loved ones because they need the finances
Right.
immediately to
Right.
feel better. And
Right.
that's what we're trying to do.
Not get sicker. And then can you give us maybe an example of one case that you've litigated recently that was a good outcome for the client?
Sure. Well, with closing, you know, many cases a month, and we've recently obtained $13 million judgment for a family severely impacted by toxic mold exposure in their own home. We've represented clients against the Irvine Company and obtained an incredible result. We've litigated against West Hollywood apartment complex, Tustin Village Apartments, Napa Valley Community Housing. We've settled this
Well,
case before the trial, before any experts'
mhm.
deposition, because all I had to do is to take the position of the person most knowledgeable and to gather all the information. And I found out so many things they did wrong. They just couldn't say no that they didn't do it. and we settled this case pretty fast. The family was extremely happy. It was a low-income housing, and the family could afford to invest into their own property and relocate from the apartment. So I feel extremely happy about
That's
this
nice.
result and about the outcome.
Yeah.
Yes.
All right. Well, again, thank you, Kseniya, for talking
Absolutely.
with me, and good luck on this. And you are from Strongin, LLP, Strongin, LLP.
Yes.
And
Yes.
where is your office?
Our
Do you have
office,
more than one?
we have one office. We are located in Ladera Range.
Okay.
It's so, it's between, San Clemente and Irvine. And we've been trying mole cases for many, many years.
Okay.
Uh, and, it's interesting that a lot of clients call us because they've hired an attorney who represents them, and then they ultimately want to come and join our firm because, they've heard that we obtain great results for our clients.
Yeah. Well, I'm sure the expertise and the experience makes a difference. All right.
Absolutely. Of
Well, thank you very much. I appreciate.
course.
Nice
Of
meeting
course.
you.
Nice to meet you, Julie. If you need anything else, please let me know. If you want us to update you on the case as we, go through experts, maybe some depositions, some quotes
Yeah, that would be great.
that I can release, I will be giving you just to keep the
Okay.
story up, and hopefully we'll make it big and, prevent those huge
Yeah.
landlord companies from, allowing this negligence
Yeah.
ongoing, and I always say that, you have to remember that a safe, healthy home is not a luxury. It's a
Right.
right protected
Right.
by California law.
Right.
So
Yeah.
that's what we're here to fight for.
And we haven't released the name in any of the stories that we've done or this because we haven't talked to them yet, but we probably will talk to them in the next week or so, and then we'll be able to disclose who it is that the story is about.
Okay. I sent them the letter of representation this morning, so
Okay.
they already know that Sarah hired lawyers to represent her.
Okay. Okay, good.
So we're gonna
All right.
hear from their lawyers pretty soon.
You want to be in the
Oh, I
video?
see somebody's there.
My grandson.
Oh,
All right. All right. Well, thank you. You have a good week.
you too. Thank you, Julie. Thank
All
you.
right.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.